Desire is sensation with the object of its attainment. The symbol may be a picture, a person, a word, a name, an idea which gives me a sensation, which makes me feel that I like or dislike it. If the sensation is pleasurable, I want to attain it, to possess, to hold on to its symbol and continue in that pleasure. From time to time, according to my inclinations and intensities, I change the picture, the image, the object. With one form of pleasure I am fed up, tired, bored, so I seek a new sensation, a new idea, a new symbol. I reject the old sensation and take on a new one, with new words, new significances, new experiences. I resist the old and yield to the new, which I consider to be higher, nobler, more satisfying. There is perception, sensation, contact, and desire, and the mind becomes the mechanical instrument of this process, in which symbols, words, objects are the centre, round which all desire, all pursuits, all ambitions are built. That centre is the me. The more I am frustrated, the more strength I give to the me. So long as there is hoping, longing, there is always the background of fear, which again strengthens the centre. And revolution is possible only at that centre, not on the surface, which is merely a process of distraction, a superficial change leading to mischievous action. My mind is the mechanical instrument of sensation, of memory, a dead centre from which I act, I think. The objects I pursue are the projections of the mind as symbols from which it derives sensations. The mind becomes merely an instrument of sensation and memory, and in that process we are caught. So long as the mind is seeking further experience, it can only think in terms of sensation, and any experience that may be spontaneous, creative, vital, strikingly new, it immediately reduces to sensation, and pursues that sensation, which then becomes a memory. Therefore, the experience is dead, and the mind becomes merely a stagnant pool of the past. In myself I see this process of desire going on, which is mechanical, repetitive, which holds the mind in a process of routine, and makes of it a dead centre of the past in which there is no creative spontaneity. Also, there are sudden moments of creation, of that which is not of the mind, which is not of memory, which is not of sensation or of desire. The mind cannot experience anything new, because its approach is always through memory, through recognition, and that which is recognized through memory is not truth, creation, or reality. It can only experience sensation, and creation is not sensation, if it is something that is everlastingly new, if it is something that is everlastingly new from moment to moment. If you will understand without being mesmerized by words, by habits, by ideas, and see how important it is to have the new constantly impinging on the mind, then perhaps you will understand the process of desire, the routine, the boredom, the constant craving for experience. Then I think you will begin to see that desire has very little significance in life for a man who is really seeking. Obviously there are certain physical needs, food, clothing, shelter, and all the rest of it, but they never become psychological appetites, things on which the mind builds itself as a centre of desire. Beyond the physical needs, any form of desire, for greatness, for truth, for virtue, becomes a psychological process by which the mind builds the idea of the me, and strengthens itself at the centre. When you see this process, when you are really aware of it without opposition, without a sense of temptation, without resistance, without justifying or judging it, then one will discover that the mind is capable of receiving the new, and that the new is never a sensation. Therefore it can never be recognized, re-experienced. It is a state of being in which creativeness comes without invitation, without memory, and that is reality. Life is relationship, which is expressed through contact with things, with people, and with ideas. In understanding relationship, we shall have capacity to meet life fully, adequately. You exist because you are related, and it is the lack of understanding of relationship that causes conflict. Now there is no understanding of relationship because we use relationship merely as a means of furthering achievement, furthering transformation, furthering becoming. But Relationship is a means of self-discovery because relationship is to be. It is existence. Relationship is a mirror in which I can see myself. That mirror can either be distorted or it can be as is, reflecting that which is. But most of us see in relationship, in that mirror, things we would rather see. We do not see what is. We would rather idealize, escape. We would rather live in the future than understand that relationship in the immediate present. We are related to someone only so long as that relationship gratifies us, so long as it gives us a refuge, so long as it satisfies us. If you really examine your life very closely, you will see it as a fact, and to avoid a fact is to live in ignorance, which can never produce right relationship. It is a process of building resistance against another, a wall over which we look and observe the other, but we always retain the wall and remain behind it, whether it be a psychological wall, a material wall, an economic wall, or a national wall. So long as we live in isolation behind a wall, there is no relationship with another, and we live enclosed because it is much more gratifying. We think it is much more secure. Still clinging to your own limitations, you think you can create world unity, world peace, which is impossible. The process of isolation is a process of the search for power, whether one is seeking power individually, or for a racial or national group. There must be isolation, because the very desire for power, for position, is separatism. What happens when you build a wall against something? That something is constantly beating against your wall. The very resistance indicates that you are in conflict with the other. Identification with something greater, the party, the country, the race, the religion, God, is the search for power, because you in yourself are empty, dull, weak. You like to identify yourself with something greater. What is important is to understand oneself in relationship with another. Then relationship becomes not a process of isolation, but a movement in which you discover your own motives, your own thoughts, your own pursuits, and that very discovery is the beginning of liberation, the beginning of transformation. So long as I am experiencing, so long as I am becoming, there must be this dualistic action. There must be the thinker and the thought, two separate processes at work. There is no integration. There is always a centre which is operating through the will of action, to be or not to be. Collectively, individually, nationally, and so on. The effort of the thinker is to become more or become less. In becoming, there is always the deteriorating factor. We are pursuing a false process. In that process of effort, he pursues the false illusion that there are two separate processes, whereas there is only one process. Therein lies the fundamental factor of deterioration. It is that process which is creative, in which there is no sense of I dominating, becoming, positively or negatively. What is important to see is that the maker of effort and the object towards which he is making effort are the same. That requires enormously great understanding, watchfulness, to see how the mind divides itself into the high and the low, the high being the security, the permanent entity, but still remaining a process of thought, and therefore of time. If we can understand this as direct experience, then you will see that quite a different factor comes into being. Thinking has not solved our problems. The philosophers, the scholars, the political leaders have not really solved any of our human problems, which are the relationship between you and another, between you and myself. Can the mind, which has created the problems, resolve those things that it has itself brought forth? So long as that thought process, that self which creates the problem, is not understood and put an end to, we are bound to have conflict, within and without, in thought, in emotion, in action. No solution of any kind, however clever, however well thought out, can ever put an end to the conflict between man and man, between you and me. Realizing this, being aware of how thought springs up and from what source, then we ask, can thought ever come to an end? Thought cannot see the completeness of the problem. It can only see partially, and a partial answer is not a complete answer. Therefore, it is not a solution. Obviously, it can be solved only when we can look at it as a whole, not in compartments, not divided. It is only possible when the process of thinking, which has its source in the me, the self, in the background of tradition, of conditioning, of prejudice, of hope, of despair, has come to an end. Not seeking to dissolve the self in order to achieve a result, but seeing the activity of the self, the me, constantly in action. If in each one of us the centre of the me is non-existent, with its desire for power, position, authority, continuance, self-preservation, surely our problems will come to an end. There must be an awareness which is not of thought. To be aware without condemnation or justification of the activities of the self, just to be aware, is sufficient. If you are aware in order to find out how to resolve the problem, in order to transform it, in order to produce a result, then it is still within the field of the self, of the me. So long as the mind is seeking to be in a state of non-greed, surely it is still greedy, is it not? Similarly, so long as the mind wishes, desires, and practices in order to be in a state in which there is love, surely it denies that state. Seeing this problem, this complex problem of living, and being aware of the process of our own thinking, and realizing that it actually leads nowhere, when we deeply realize that, then surely there is a state of intelligence, which is not individual or collective. Then the problem of the relationship of the individual to society, of the individual to the community, of the individual to reality, ceases. It is his intelligence alone, I feel, that can solve our immense problems. That cannot be a result. It comes into being only when we understand the total process of thinking, not only at the conscious level, but also at the deeper, hidden levels of consciousness. To understand any of these problems, we have to have a very quiet mind, a very still mind, so that the mind can look at the problem without interposing ideas or theories, without any distraction. Thought, when you have a problem, becomes a distraction. Thought being an idea, an opinion, judgment, comparison, which prevents us from looking and thereby understanding and resolving the problem. A mind that is very quiet, a mind that is not distracted by its own thought, a mind that is open, can look at the problem very directly and very simply. And it is this capacity to look without any distraction at our problems that is the only solution. It comes into being through no form of discipline or compulsion or sublimation, without any effort of the me, of thought. In that state of tranquility of a mind that is really still there is love. We have to find out what the mind that we use in our everyday life, and also the mind of which most of us are unconscious, does in relation to our problems. We must look at the mind as it is, and not as it should be. When you observe your own thinking, you will see it is an isolated, fragmentary process. You are thinking according to your reactions, the reactions of your memory, of your experience, of your knowledge, of your belief. If I say that there must be a fundamental revolution, you immediately react. You will object to that word, revolution. If you have got good investments, spiritual or otherwise. So your reaction is dependent on your knowledge, on your belief, on your experience. All these give security, do they not? They give security, give strength to the process of thinking. That process only strengthens the me, the mind, the self, whether you call that self high or low. All our religions, all our social sanctions, all our laws are for the support of the individual self, the separative action, and in opposition to that there is the totalitarian state. If you go deeper into the unconscious, there too is the same process that is at work. There we are the collective, influenced by the environment, by the climate, by the society, by the father and the mother, the grandfather. There again is the desire to assert, to dominate as an individual, as the me. The function of the mind is to be separated, otherwise your mind is not there. Having cultivated this process for centuries, we find we cannot cooperate. We can only be urged, compelled, driven by authority, fear, either economic or religious. If that is the actual state, not only consciously, but also at the deeper levels, in our motives, our intentions, our pursuits, how can there be cooperation? How can there be intelligent coming together to do something? As that is almost impossible, religions and organized social parties force the individual. Until we understand how to transcend this separative thinking, this process of giving emphasis to the me and the mine, whether in the collective form or the individual form, we shall not have peace. We shall have constant conflict and wars. When I think along these lines, I must discipline, I must think more properly, I must be this or that. Thought is compelling itself, urging itself, disciplining itself to be something or not to be something, a process of isolation. Please examine the disciplining process, which is solely a thought process, in which there is subjection, repression, control, domination, all affecting the unconscious, which asserts itself later as you grow older, when you realize that fundamentally or deeply that thought cannot end itself. You understand that any reaction is conditioned and that, through conditioning, there can be no freedom, either at the beginning or at the end, and freedom is always at the beginning. Surely, if you see all that, there is already a different process at work. The intellect, with all its ramifications, with all its desires, ambitions, pursuits, must come to an end for love to come into existence. You are not thinking of yourself. That is the highest form of intelligence. When your vested interests are there can be no love. There is only the process of exploitation, born of fear. It is only when we know how to love each other that there can be cooperation, that there can be intelligent functioning, a coming together over any question. Only then is it possible to find out what God is, what truth is. We should, if I may suggest it, not merely listen to the speaker, but follow the problem as we know it in our daily life. First, you must purge your mind completely of every factor that is in the way, every hope, every desire to continue, every desire to find out what is on the other side, because the mind is constantly seeking security. It has the desire to continue, and hopes for a means of fulfillment, for a future existence. Such a mind is incapable of discovering that truth. What is important is the approach to the problem. With what motivation, with what urge, with what desire you come to it. The fundamental factor of self-deception is this constant desire to be something, in this world and in the world hereafter. So we begin to deceive ourselves the moment there is the urge to be, to become, or to achieve. One of the basic problems of our life. Is it possible to live in this world and be nothing? Then only is there freedom from all deception, because then only is the mind not seeking a result. The mind is not seeking a satisfactory answer. The mind is not seeking any form of justification. The mind is not seeking security in any form, in any relationship. That takes place only when the mind realizes the possibilities and subtleties of deception, and therefore with understanding abandons every form of justification, security, which means the mind is capable then of being completely nothing. There can be cooperation only when you and I have no common aim created by thought. Cooperation is only possible when you and I do not desire to be anything. You and I agree to do a certain piece of work intellectually, but unconsciously, deeply, you and I are at battle. Unconsciously and deeply, you have your beliefs and I have mine. By talking about brotherhood, we have not solved the whole problem of beliefs, but have only theoretically and intellectually agreed. Experience becomes a dividing factor in our human relationship. Experience is a way of deception. If I have experienced something, I cling to it. I do not go into the whole problem of the process of experiencing, but because I have experienced, that is sufficient, and I cling to it. Each of us is so identified with a particular belief, with a particular form or method of bringing about happiness, economic adjustment, that our mind is captured by that, and we are incapable of going deeper into the problem, until we dissolve them through understanding, not only at the superficial level, But at the deeper level also, there can be no peace in the world. Such things come when the mind does not seek, when the mind is completely quiet, no longer creating movements and beliefs upon which it can depend, or from which it derives a certain strength, which is an indication of self-deception. It is only when the mind understands this whole process of desire that it can be still. Only then is the mind not in movement to be or not to be. Then only is there the possibility of a state in which there is no deception. To understand what this self-activity is, one must obviously examine it, look at it, be aware of the entire process. If one can be aware of it, then there is the possibility of dissolution. But to be aware of it requires a certain understanding, a certain intention to face the thing as it is, and not to interpret, not to modify, not to condemn it. In order to understand something, we must be capable of looking at it, and to look at it we must know its various activities at different levels, conscious as well as unconscious. The conscious directives, and also the self-centered movements of our unconscious motives and intentions. A man who pursues virtue consciously is unvirtuous. Humility cannot be pursued, and that is the beauty of humility. The self-centered activity of the me is a time process. It is memory that gives continuity to the activity of the center, which is the me. If you watch yourself and are aware of this center of activity, you will see that it is only the process of time, of memory, of experiencing and translating every experience according to a memory. Is it possible for the mind ever to be completely free from self-centered activity? That is a very important question to put to ourselves, because in the very putting of it, you will find the answer. Is it possible not to think in terms of time, not to think in terms of what I shall be, what I have been, what I am? For from such thought, the whole process of self-centered activity begins. There also begins the determination to become, the determination to choose and to avoid, which are all processes of time. We see in that process infinite mischief, misery, confusion, distortion, deterioration. It is only when you have complete cessation of the time process, of the activity of the self, it is only with revolution, not through evolution, not through the me becoming, but through the me completely coming to an end, that there is the new. The time process cannot bring the new. Time is not the way of creation. Our question surely is it possible for the mind to be in that state without regard to time? Surely that is an important discovery to be made by each one of us, because that is the door to love. All other doors are activities of the self. The moment we are conscious that we love, self-activity has come into being, therefore it ceases to be love. The total process of the mind is to be understood only through relationship with nature, with people, with our own projections, with everything about us. Life is nothing but relationship, being aware of the whole process of time as consciousness, without any choice, without any determined, purposive intention, without the desire for any result. You will see that the process of time comes to an end voluntarily, not induced, not as a result of desire. It is only when that process comes to an end that love is, which is eternally new. Truth is not something far away. It is the truth about the mind, truth about its activities from moment to moment. If we are aware of this moment-to-moment truth, of this whole process of time, that awareness releases consciousness for the energy, which is intelligence, love.